This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 77 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. We are talking today about the unstoppable urge to travel. I've chatted with a couple of people about sort of where this comes from and how it plays out and what they do with this unstoppable urge to travel. I definitely have it myself, and during some of the chats today, I give some reasons why I think that is the case. But before we get on to those chats, I want to give a shout out to our Facebook group, the Thoughtful Travellers group, because they are such a beautiful group of people in there. And in particular, the lovely Joanna this week said, "Hey Amanda, I listen to your podcasts before I go to bed. The discussions clear my mind of stress and worry, and I instead dream of trips and destinations. What a blessing." And honestly, that is one of the coolest things anyone ever told me in my life, to think that the podcast is interesting and useful enough that it's something of choice to listen to just before you go to bed. I think that's amazing. So thanks so much, Joanna. And to everyone in the Facebook group, Thoughtful Travellers, because I love the conversations we have in there. So if you're not in that group, do look it up and request to join. It's a lovely, lovely little space on the internet. Anyway, so onto this unstoppable urge to travel. Interestingly, last week it was, I think, I gave a talk at a local festival here. I was a speaker in the Ideas Lab at this festival. And of course, my idea was all about the many benefits of travel. And I had a lovely audience there, and I think probably most of them would agree they had this unstoppable urge to travel. But it was interesting because we disagreed on whether or not we travelled because there were benefits or if that was just a bonus. So I was saying things like, let's flip that idea and let's go travelling because we know it will, for example, give us confidence or help us be inspired and so on. But one particular lady in the audience said, I just go travelling because I like it. And then afterwards, maybe there's some benefits. So it was a really interesting conversation. But what we all had in common was this unstoppable urge to travel. And my first guest today is a man named Matt Eakin, who has a really interesting trajectory in life. I'll tell you some more of that after our chat. But I love this story that he told me. He had completely an unstoppable urge to travel without with almost no reason. It's just something that was really innately inside him. And he tells us of the story when he first went travelling, just finished high school, age 17, and off he went.
When I left school a number of years ago, the most fascinating thing happened to me. I left school and went overseas with no plans, just with the expectation that something amazing was going to happen.
This seems like, so you were like 17 or 18 or so?
Yes, I was 17. I hadn't turned 18 yet. I was about to turn 18 and I left Australia, went overseas with a one-way ticket and no money and a backpack. Alone? Yes.
Ooh, quite brave.
Yes, brave, or maybe I probably wasn't even thinking enough to think that it was brave. Maybe not
you
even
just
smart
wanted
enough
to go no matter what.
Yep.
Okay. So
and
what
roll
happened?
the dice. So when I left Australia and I travelled through America a little bit, but then I ended up in Dublin, Ireland. And at this point, I had made another smart decision to send all my clothes home because I was carrying a lot of clothes in my backpack and it was too heavy. Mm-hmm. And which is a smart move to send that home if you're not going into winter.
Oh,
but I was going into winter in Dublin.
Oh no!
And I was then left with my board shorts, the thongs, t-shirt, really good summer weather gear for Australia. But obviously the problem was that I was in Dublin in the middle of winter.
Yeah, I've been in Dublin in the middle of summer and I needed more than shorts and a t-shirt.
Yes, got it. So, you can appreciate that that was a bit of a problem. But so I was traveling. I had no money. At that point in my life, I was drinking. I subsequently don't drink anymore. But I was traveling around Ireland, and I arrived in Dublin, and I had no money. And then so I went to the ATM to get some money out, and you can see where this is going. The card doesn't work.
Of course not.
So I've got like £3 or whatever it was at the time, and no money and no phone. Back then this is 1999, so almost getting close to 20 years ago. No way to access the internet, and I thought, what can I do? Nowhere to stay. So I went to McDonald's in the middle of Dublin, Ireland, and I said to the girl behind the counter, I said, excuse me, I'm from Australia, and essentially begged with her to give me some, because by this time I hadn't eaten for 2 days. I hadn't slept for a couple of days. I'd been drinking too much, and it wasn't traveling too well. So I then I sort of tried to explain this to the girl in a way that would enable her to say, I understand. I'm not sure how well I did, but in the middle of winter, I begged with her, I said, is there a possibility to get some free food? And in the middle of it, then she said to me, I can give you a thick shake.
A thick shake? A very cold thick shake?
Yes. So I thought this is quite odd. I was sitting there thinking, this is really odd to get a thick shake in the middle of winter. But I thought this just...
It's better than nothing.
I just sat there and... That's exactly right. And I sat there thinking how odd that it is to get a thick shake in the middle of winter. But I thought this is such an interesting, just such a fascinating thing to have happen. I've got no money. I'm on the other side of the world. I can't contact anyone. I've got nowhere to sleep. I've got no food. I haven't got proper clothes. So I accepted it and thought, this is how hilarious this is. But I accepted it with, thinking, this is great. I've got some food now. So when I got that thick shake, and then she gave it to me for free, obviously. And then I got a thick shake across the road on this step, and sitting there thinking, okay, well, step one has sort of been achieved. I've got a free thick shake. Step two, I still don't have any clothes. I don't have anywhere to sleep. I'm freezing. It's raining, as it always does in Dublin. And now what am I going to do for a place to stay? And so oddly enough, I met these two Australian girls, and they said, what are you doing here? You're in board shorts in the middle of Dublin, and something must be up. And I sort of explained my scenario, and I said, look, I've got nowhere to stay. And they said, oh, well, that's okay. You can come and stay with us.
Fabulous.
And they had this hostel, and then so they basically spotted me the money for the hostel. I made a collect call back to Australia. I got some friends to spot me some money. But then, of course, that's not going to come, and it's Friday, so that's not coming through until at least Wednesday.
Yes.
So I'm sitting thinking, oh gosh, and then they spotted me the money for the hostel. So I stayed in the hostel with them, and then they helped me through the weekend and then through the next week. And then when the money came through, I gave them back the 20 or 30 quid it was. And ever since then, I've known them for like 20 years of my life, and been great friends. So
you're still in touch. That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's incredible. And funny enough, one of the girls just sent me a message not long ago saying she's based in Melbourne, but she moved to Asia and she's coming back, and she said, we've got to catch up, and and she made a joke about it. We've got to buy you another thick shake or something. And it's just like, even to this day, the joke is still very real and still very funny.
Oh, so, that is excellent.
Yeah, and I suspect that this joke will last for
lifetime,
forever. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
So it's been and ever since then, and not only I think. It's an incredible story about how we've been amazing friends since then, and just the story of traveling and what happens when you travel. But But also that's been a great inspiration for me and a lot of things that I've done in my life, that the paradox of traveling is that if it had have gone all to plan, I wouldn't have had this experience, I wouldn't have had this story, and I wouldn't have been able the chance to meet these amazing people as well. So
absolutely, very, very often it's the things that go wrong that make your trip, or that have those more life-changing moments. When things go wrong, it's really going right.
Yes, it's like a delayed. You just have to sort of wait it out to then realise how that experience. But
when you're standing on the Dublin streets in your board shorts, shivering and starving, it doesn't feel that right, but it works out.
Yeah, that's correct. I think even at the time, though, I was sitting there thinking, how awesome this experience is.
Oh, good.
Like, I was just absolutely loving it. I was just thinking, this is exactly what I went travelling for.
Perfect.
I never thought I'd end up sitting here with a cold thick shake in my hand. My hands were freezing by this stage as well, because the thick shake was really cold. And
yes,
I couldn't help. And you can't help but sit there and laugh and yourself. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and thought, this is exactly what the journey was.
That's brilliant. How did you have the foresight at 17 to realise that's what you wanted to do?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. For me, there was just not really much of a decision. I just always knew. I just knew this is, for me, it was just simply waiting to get to the end of school to start my journey.
Right.
So it wasn't for me, it wasn't, I had an epiphany or something happened or a bad experience, and then I was sort of forced to do this. For me, it was, I just knew I was just all in from when I was from younger, and I just had to wait until I got this pain of getting school out of the road, and then I could start the journey. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
I don't know why that is, but I was quite different to the mates at school.
Had you travelled much during your childhood at all, or?
No, I'd been to New Zealand when I was a kid, like 10 years old, and then been to Indonesia, Bali, with my mum when I was 15 or 16, I think. So not too long before going over. Mm-hmm. But coming back from Indonesia, and actually that was during the Asian crisis as well. So, and the reason why I say that is because I just learned. It was just a really confronting experience to see how you can change $10 and then you end up with, $1 trillion. A lot of money, and how in Australia, that we have. At that time, I had no idea, and living in Australia, growing up in boarding school, that that people were really living in such different circumstances.
Yeah. You were at boarding school, did you just say?
Yes.
So do you think that gave you an extra boost of independence already, so it was easier to just take off overseas at 17?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it did. Yeah, it definitely did. I don't know. It is obviously hypothetical, isn't it? To work out. Yeah. I had maybe the same view had I been in a different schooling environment, but I definitely do think. But oddly enough, probably for the wrong reason as well, because having been caught in boarding school my whole life, and I just thought now it's time to actually go and get free. So it's almost in another different way
to what I was thinking. Yeah.
But most certainly, both the independence that it gave me, forces to give you, and then also from being caught there and realizing that the environment that I was in was lived very
like in a regimented way, or was it?
Absolutely, lived in a very regimented way, and just with boundaries and blinkers to certain aspects of the world, and for me, I needed to go and touch the stove to know it was hot, and I wanted to go and find out, what that was like in a different country. Yeah.
Gotta love getting a free thick shake in the middle of an Irish winter when you're starving and dressed in t-shirt and shorts. I love that story. Anyway, the interesting thing about Matt, an additional interesting thing about Matt, is he's gone on to make travel really his life, and he's set up a business to encourage young people, sort of teenagers, to travel as well, perhaps with slightly more common sense than he had at that moment in time. But he has a business called Himalayan Schoolies. So Schoolies is, I don't know if it's an Australian term, but Schoolies is what is people who've just finished high school, and traditionally we head off, and in Perth, for example, we go down south town a couple of hours away, or to Rottnest Island, and party a lot for a week or so. So he set up this company where he takes or sends groups of teenagers to the Himalayas, and they do trekking and volunteer work and all this other cool stuff. Less of the pure partying, clearly. And I think that's just a fabulous idea. To the point, for example, this morning I woke up and I read the news, and it's Schoolies Week right now in many parts of Australia, and there was a group of teenagers on the Gold Coast who had thoroughly trashed, completely destroyed a hotel room. In fact, a hotel room where I stayed, well, not the exact room, same hotel, where I stayed a couple of years ago for a conference, and it looked really different in these pictures. So I thought immediately they should have done a Himalayan Schoolies trip instead, and I bet their parents are sure wishing they are. Anyway, that is Matt's story. And now I want to tell you some of Yasmin's story. So Yasmin Newman's been on the podcast before. You might remember her as a very devoted foodie who spent some time in New York eating all the desserts so she could create a book about all the desserts of New York. But she has some interesting tales to tell about how and why travel has been this unstoppable urge for her as well.
Look, I think that my whole life is a culmination of the travel that I've done. So in that way, travel has been so integral to what I do, but I think it's informed what I have done through my life. I guess as a child, I was really lucky to have parents that understood, and I guess they would by nature because they're kind of a cross-cultural relationship, my father being Australian and my mother being Filipino, that as children, my brother and I might have some questions about our identity, or maybe even struggles with them. Not that we did, but I think in taking us to the Philippines every year from when we were born, or every other year, was the key to us feeling very settled about who we are and where we come from, and being proud of that. And for me, that kind of led me even further to wanting to be to write about travel and about food. I think that's very much where it stemmed from. I mean, 7,000 Islands, a food portrait of the Philippines. My first book was, my quest to help share the Filipino story in the broader world, because I know that most people don't know that much about the country, and even less about the food. Travel and my life are kind of intertwined.
Yeah, I feel the same about mine, to be honest, that if I hadn't been brought up as, a travelling kind of person, my life would look completely and utterly different, and I can't imagine where I would have ended up. But having said that, my sister, who had the same upbringing as me, ended up not, she travels occasionally, but, doesn't love it, and, has never lived away from Perth and so on. So you said you had a brother, did you?
Yes, I did.
Does he have the same kind of attitude to travel as you?
Not to the same extent. Those early trips to the Philippines, and I remember just this one in particular. I was about 16, and I was on this boat in this beautiful region of the Philippines called Mindoro, which is where my mum's from, and I was just on the top of it thinking, isn't this just incredible? To be in this island paradise that not many people get to go to. And I think that was that moment where I thought, I just love this. It feels so special. And from that point forth, I kind of planned a trip every year. I did my exchange in France, and that was kind of in high school, but really my own of my own volition.
Right.
And then through university, I took time off to go traveling through Europe, and that's when I lived in France, and then I moved to the US, and then I went to the Philippines, to research my book. My brother has always loved traveling. He's loved those trips to the Philippines, but not that sense of I need to do this. This needs to be, common practice in my life and every year. But in saying that, a couple of years ago, he said, I really, I feel like I've maybe missed the boat of that live and work abroad thing that you've done so much of, and that a lot of Australians have, and I want to do that. So he, this is when the E3 visas were coming into effect in the US, and he's decided to go move to New York. And he was part of that kind of first wave of Australians kind of swapping London, or New York for London, as that kind of city to be, a working professional, and it kind of being a base of which to explore other places. And, he only kind of intended to be there for a year or two, and he's been there, I think, about 6 years now.
Wow.
In the process of getting his green card, probably won't come back. But,
Gosh.
I'm grateful that he did that, because, that was the inspiration or part of for, our dessert mission in New York was to kind of go spend time with him. So,
oh, perfect. So maybe he is more similar to you now. Yeah.
Yes, I think our pathways have been different, but I think that kind of seed was planted really early.
Right.
Kind of manifested differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's still time for my sister to become a travel addict the way I am then.
Yes.
Oh, it's fascinating. Yes, I go back. My parents took us on a camper van trip around Europe, like total budget travel for 6 months when I was 9 years old. And, that completely planted the seed for me that I, absolutely had to travel regularly and live abroad and do everything I could to see different places. And without that, I don't know what I would have done through my life. It would have looked so different. So.
Yeah. And so we have 2 young children, so, we're trying to kind of do those experiences with them too. We often talk that, our daughter will remember this time in New York, and she probably won't, but even just to know that she went on this, food adventure in New York when she was, not even 2 years old. Yeah, hopefully that inspires some sense of cultural curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just a love of ice cream.
Yes, exactly. My son will definitely have it, because I was pregnant with him at the time when I was eating all of these desserts. And
so he should have a really sweet tooth.
Yes, yeah. I feel a little bit bad because it wasn't the healthiest diet for him, but he's 1 year old now, and he is a delightful character. It must have just sweetened his soul.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Perfect. And like with your daughter who was nearly 2, she probably won't remember exactly that experience, but you guys will always talk about it, and she'll see photos, and she'll always know that that's what she did. And I think that really does shape you.
Yes, definitely. And I feel uniquely lucky with this particular book, The Desserts of New York, that, that I got to kind of, one, from a personal experience, involve her in that, but that I've been able to immortalize that in the book for her to kind of look back on and read this story, when she's older, and see the photos of her in there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Like Yasmin, I'm also trying to instill this urge to travel in my son, and it would be really interesting to see how that progresses in future years. I'm often reminded of a friend of mine who lived in Slovakia with her son, and she was still is, a mad keen traveller. And when I met them, he was a teenager, and he would still go along on trips with her. There was just the 2 of them. But he would kind of act all reluctant about it. And, you never know, well, is it what he really thinks, or was it just, teenage rebellion kind of thing? And he's gone on to become a flight attendant and travel the world constantly. So I guess that it worked, and she really instilled him with this unstoppable urge to travel. So this is my goal too. We'll see how it works out. I just think there's so many benefits to it. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to episode 77 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. You can find some more info about our guests at these links Matt's site is himalayanschoolies.com. If you have a teenager who's leaving school in the next few years, I would have a look at that for sure. And Yasmin's works, you can find most of her stuff at yasminnewman.com, but I'll also leave links in the show notes to the couple of books that she mentioned, both the Food Portrait of the Philippines and the Desserts of New York book. It's amazing. All right. Of course, all of these show notes all of the info will be in the show notes at notaballerina.com/77. And you can join our Facebook group, Thoughtful Travellers. Just search for that on Facebook or click through from the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.